Okay. All right, so let's talk about synthesis first. So what are y'all feeling? Like, I know most of y'all, well, all of y'all are in here are fine. You're totally going to be fine. Y'all need to stop stressing. So I'm here just to kind of reestablish all the things that you've been taught all year so that you feel comfortable going in. All right? So what are we still concerned about with synthesis, so I can kind of hit those as we go? Like, what are you feeling like you still struggle with?
Finding, like, really good evidence.
Okay.
That I can use.
And I'll tell you, that's one of the things that we see in the summer is, not that I want you to spend a lot of time trying to find different pieces of evidence or unique pieces of evidence, but whatever you're automatically drawn to in a source, 95% of the essays I read are going to have that same piece of evidence, right? Which isn't bad. However, if you can find something that is not I don't want to say, like, I don't want you to spend time trying to find, I don't want you to spend time trying to find something that won't be what everybody else chooses, but just beware, right? Like the one we did for when we read monolingualism, and there was that one source that talked about, like, oh, learning a language is like calisthenics for the brain. Like, every essay used that, right? And it was, most of the ones that actually used that were like the low to mid-level, like 4 or 5s. So we'll talk about, we'll go through and the sources that we're looking, I'll look at that. What else?
Just like, since it's the first essay, I took way too much time on that.
Yeah.
Just like timing, I guess.
Okay, and we talked about that, right? Like, we talked about, how many of you spent more than your 55 minutes? So you had 15 plus your 40. How many of you spent more than your 55 minutes on synthesis? Okay, how many of you got an 8 or a 9 on it? Okay, so the time you spent did not serve you well. How many of you got a 7 on it? Okay, so the time you spent over that was not worth your time, right? Now, I had some people that spent like 60, 65 minutes on synthesis, but they had a 7 or an 8. And I'm like, okay, if you feel like you need the extra 5 or 10 minutes, it paid off, right? But if you're not getting that payoff in it, then there's no reason to spend more time, right? Get in, do what you should, and get out. So, and what I think that starts you off on the wrong foot, to where if you are not managing your time in the beginning, you are going to feel that sense of angst the rest of the test, right? It's not worth it. So couple of things. Make sure you have to have your 3 sources in there. So manage your time. In your 15 minutes of reading and planning, if you're not done at the end of the 15 minutes reading and planning, get out and start writing. And then figure out the rest as you go. Does that make sense? Like, figure out the rest. At least if you know where you're starting off, you can at least finish. I don't want you writing a paper without a plan, but if you have a plan to start, then you can kind of piece together the last part, right? The worst thing to do is to spend too much time on synthesis and then just feel this sense of dread in the rest of your essays, having to change, right? What else? How many of you got a 4 on your mock exam? 4 on the mock exam synthesis? 5? 6? Okay. So, I mean, we'll do a couple of things that should, if you're in that range, be able to move you fairly easily. All right? All right, anything else? Good evidence, timing? All right, y'all tell me. Here's your prompt. What do we do first? Synthesis prompt. What do we do first? Oh my God, please tell me. Y'all are 2 days before the exam. You look at the issue. So the very first paragraph, right? Okay. So in the United States, kindergarten has generally been considered an educational setting that provides opportunities for children to ready themselves for the academic and social worlds of formal education. All right. So here is your topic. It's not your issue yet. It's just, It's just your topic, right? Is that so much better? Stop. Okay, so that is your topic. This first sentence here all talks about the purpose of kindergarten. So they're giving you this because they don't think you understand that, right? Okay. And notice that there are two, when I'm going in, I'm just going to kind of walk you through what I see when I do it, right? So notice that there are two roles. So these are the two roles that kindergarten is used for, right? To prepare them for the academic and the social worlds. Make sense? Okay. However, here's going to be where there's a problem. The 21st century drive towards increased academic standards has been felt even in the earliest grades, leading some researchers to express concern that the kindergarten experience is being compromised. Okay, so 21st century increased academic standards. Okay, so we kind of talked about this with, what did we recently do? Creativity, right? So what's happening in the 21st century? So what I'm doing here is I'm building context. And actually, I just tweeted this out the other day. The College Board has like AP exam tips, and one of the tips they sent out the other day was make sure you're creating context around the argument. Well, this is why we do this, right? So what's happening in the 21st century? What have y'all been doing ever since you were in elementary school? Standardized testing.
And it's time to clear the hallways. You should be in the classroom for tutorials and practice.
All right, so that's what I'm thinking. This little autofocus is driving me crazy. So that's what I keep thinking about is the fact that like standardized testing is the focus. And even though it doesn't happen in kindergarten, we have to prepare our kids for that. So if we are doing that academically, then what are we forgetting? Okay, so this is what gets left behind in the 21st century. All right. So this is your background information, right? All right, so now I kind of know where I'm going. Consider the implications of transforming kindergarten into a more academic environment than it has been in the past. Synthesize material from at least 3 of the sources and incorporate it into coherent well-written argument in which you, sorry, I had to see who that was. A well-written argument in which you take a position on what kindergarten should be. So remember, as soon as we read the task, we want to write a question, right? So, I'm going to write, what should kindergarten be now? That's the answer that I have to have, right? Nice life. All right, so that's what I'm looking at. Okay, so now this is, before I get in, I think this one is, I like this one. This is the one from the practice test last year that some schools actually got. What I would look at in this is I would say, okay, now I want to prep before I get in. More so than like eminent domain where I thought we were like, I don't even know. Here is where we can prep before. So let's take this. Who is involved in these issues? Like who's affected by kindergarten? Whose perspectives can we look at? Teachers. Okay, teachers, parents, yeah, students. I mean, and then I would say society or community, right? Because if you have kids that are coming out ill-prepared, right, even from the kindergarten way, then you're going to have kids that are ill-prepared that are turned to be middle school kids that are ill-prepared, high school, and then society, right? So we can look at this issue. So when y'all are struggling to have your own voice or your own opinion, now what you've done is you said, who cares about this issue? Now you've given yourself 4 different voices that you can expand on a piece of evidence with. Does that make sense? For me, and I would say, I guess for eminent domain, you could have done that by policymakers, by a community, by a government, so you would be able to look at it just kind of like we do for rhetorical analysis when we look at like who is the audience, same thing here, right? You're going to look at and see, like, here's the voices that I can use to create this. Okay, so let's look at, so we see that it's like academic and social. Okay, so academic, and let's do now, and let's do future. Okay, so academically, this is driving me nuts. Academically, I love when technology works. Academically, what's happening now, kindergarten? Like, what are they preparing them for now? What's the focus now in kindergarten? Do what?
First grade.
Well, but what things are they preparing them for? Yeah, so they have to know, like, the alphabet, right? Okay, writing. Numbers.
Reading.
Yep. Okay. Future, how is that going to change? Or should it change?
More on like behavioral, like norms, like I know they do that now, but like academic science.
No, it's okay. We'll do social too. So should these all stay the same? I mean, yeah, I think so. So the question here that I have when I'm looking at this is like, so how has it changed? If we're saying that the focus is different, how has it changed? In my mind, I would say that we would look more at, like, if we're focused more on academics, then this would be the focus for like preschools, to where kindergarten we would now start reading more at and I'm going to tell you, in kindergarten Cooper wasn't really reading, right? Like, she was just kind of piecing words together and being able to identify words and sounds, right? Not necessarily reading books. So if we're looking at kindergarten being more advanced, then what does it look like today? Then probably what it's looking like is that people are going to preschool and learning the foundations, and then kindergarten is just kind of the advanced. Think of it along the lines of, some schools are offering like dual credit classes in the 9th grade level so that they could stay like 1 year ahead, right? So think about that same thing in kindergarten, right? They're kind of moving them ahead. Okay, socially, what do we think we should be doing, or what do we think we should be doing now? What's the focus on kindergartners now?
I don't know if this would be like socially, but a lot of kindergartners get put in like the GT program, so they get separated from everyone else.
Okay, so I mean, I would say like you could put that in like your academic. So gifted and talented programs. I'd put that as a list down there. What's happening socially in schools? Like, what? Think about kindergarten. It was a long time ago.
Like behavior cards, like you get like your color changed.
Yep. Cooper got all the way down to purple. Yeah, who knew that was a thing? It was. It was a thing.
Oh,
Yep.
we had
Yep.
green, yellow, red.
Oh no, we had
Blue, purple.
Roy G. Biv. And she was on the violet and many times because she just couldn't stop talking. Imagine that. All right, what else do you think of when you think of social?
Sharing.
Okay, sharing, yep, all the basics. I know, right?
Like PE, art, recess, like all that kind of
Just like forcing you to be around other kids.
creativity stuff.
Yeah, but it's like social norming. It is like learning how to function in groups. Learning how to sit still. Right? All those things that like you have to learn how to do. Do we see that needs to change for the future? Do we still need to focus on that? Yeah.
Oh, another one's like respect, like adults.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big one, respecting towards adults. Okay? All right. So, now we kind of have a plan of what we think it already looks like. Agreed? Now when we go in, we can say, okay, so where has the focus been? And we can start kind of shifting those things together. Right? All right. Now, when we go in, last week my kiddos did this, we talked about like personas, right? So let's look at the persona. Let's look at source A first. Source A, Anne Svensson, maybe she's Swedish. Family education. Okay, so that is a online parenting informational source. So this is from the view of a parent. So there is your persona. All right. Remember what we said, when we see things that are bulleted or bolded and listed, a lot of times I think of those as being ones that are like lower level sources, because those are sources that I feel like they're giving you a little background information that they don't think you know. So if we look at in the beginning, stain from its roots and the fallout, so this is going to kind of show us maybe some change, I would say, right? All right, it used to be so simple. 5 years old went to kindergarten, 5-year-olds went to kindergarten, 6-year-olds went to the first grade. But what was once a natural course of events has recently become a difficult decision for many parents. Why? Because kindergarten ain't what it used to be. In the beginning, kindergarten was originally conceived in the 1800s by German philosopher and school teacher Friedrich Froebel. He thought of it literally as a child's garden, a place to fill with plants and flowers and nurture children's curiosity. It was not meant to be a functional classroom. So this was the original intent, is what I'm looking at, equals curiosity. No education. No school, no academic, no nothing, just fostering education. Vivian Paley, author and award-winning early childhood educator, believes that the goal of this first school year is to develop the social and imaginative strengths of children and to build confidence. She has this message for kindergarten teachers: know your subject, play. Okay, this is going to be one that everybody would use, right? This quote that everybody would use, I still wouldn't use that, right? So what we're looking at is that we're looking at the idea of curiosity and confidence. This is what it originally was. This is what it should be, right? Building imagination and confidence. Strain from its roots. Froebel would be shocked by the latest trend in kindergarten education, a trend that's turning kindergartners away from their roots and into mini or trickle-down first grades. In these classrooms, 5-year-olds are writing sentences, identifying phonic sounds, making books, and learning the state capitals. Okay, so here is like the new trend. So notice I like this idea of, where was it? Trickle down first graders. Y'all, it's the same thing, this idea of trickle down. I'm going to align it with your dual credit. All dual credit is trickle down college, right? So when you see something like that, that is something that you can extend on. Trickle down college, trickle down first grade. It's the same thing, right? Ruenzel, the author of a Teacher magazine article on this subject, suggests this reason for the trend. Parents whose children have long been in daycare and preschool, okay, so this is why this changes, that have been in daycare and preschool often perceive a half day centered around play as a step backward. They want beginning reading and writing, not more play. Okay, so preschool and daycare, their focus has been creativity and play. Other experts think that schools are stressing academics in kindergarten in response to a public demand for higher standardized test scores. Okay, so here are 2 reasons for the change. So for me, this source, again, I wouldn't use it, because what is it doing? It's really telling me why this change has happened. Does that make sense? The fallout. Paley notes that with this push for early academics, we are beginning to hear about kindergartners who are deficient in various abilities or slow learners, when in fact, they may be well within their appropriate developmental age. This, I think, is interesting. They're slow compared to maybe other students who have been in preschool or have been in daycares that have this like academic program, right? But if you look at the typical kindergartner from what historically has been, they are not slow, they are at level. Okay? Parents who do not want to see their children unfairly labeled may now be waiting until their kids are 6 to enroll them in kindergarten. Right? So this is happening everywhere. A lot of people do it for athletic reasons around here, but Lori Shepard, professor of education at the University of Colorado, believes these parents are acting in the best interest of their child. But she says this practice is changing the balance in many kindergarten programs and actually perpetuating the trend towards academics. In regard to the trickle-down first grade trend, the National Association for the Education of Young Children holds this common sense position. The pressure should not be on the child to meet a school's expectations. This, I think, would probably be a good little soundbite. Kindergarten and first grade programs should be ready to meet the developmentally diverse needs and abilities of all children. So ultimately what this is suggesting is that it will like academics will kind of all even out. Past first grade. So for me, is that a source that we would want to use? I mean, not really. For me, this tells me why the trend is happening. It maybe gives me some good ideas of like where we're going, right? Or some solutions, but for me, it's giving me the opportunity to say, okay, I understand this position a little bit more. Now I can dive in. Now listen to me. What we're doing is taking a lot of time. It will not take that time on the test. All right? So let's look at the personas from the other ones quickly and see which ones we want to read. So this is a time saver. If you're like, oh, I don't know, look at the personas. So look at source B. Read source B. Try to figure out your persona real quick. Just read the MLA information in the box and then in the italicized part. What would you say your persona is? Whose position is this from? Yeah, I mean, this would be researcher. This would be, I mean, you're looking at like a college. It's from a college source, right? All right. Put that to the side. Look at C. What's your persona? College kid wanting to be a teacher. Right? Written by a college student and posted to an education courses website. So this is a college kid that wants to become a teacher that is posting to other college kids that want to be teachers. So these are like soon to be teachers. Do they have a play in this game? Absolutely, right? Okay, next one. What do you think the persona? Who would care about this? Who? No, I mean, I would say parents. Yeah, I mean, I would say the persona that would care about this. The following is from a United States-based nonprofit research center that provides information on the well-being of children and youth. So who's going to be concerned about this? Parents are, right? Schools, yeah. Okay. Source E. What's your persona?
Teachers.
Or like it's from like Scholastic.
I think it's a little bias, right? Because you have on here, it's a website of a company that publishes and distributes children's books. So do they want kids like having a book in hand earlier? Yeah, so they are going to be like, this is like big business. So this is going to be pro reading early, right? The earlier you start reading, the more money in my pocket. Source F, I hate this one. What persona can you take on here? Yeah, I mean, I would say as a parent, right? I could take a view from this as a parent, negatively looking at this image. So my kid is being taught or is being occupied by an iPad and headphones instead of like one-on-one instruction with the teacher, right? Okay. All right. So now, here's what I want to do. All right. One. Y'all are source B. Y'all are source C. Y'all are source D. Y'all are E. And y'all are source B. All right? B, C, D, E. Number your body paragraphs real quick for whichever one you got. Go through and find me a sound bite. Talk with your group. Find me a sound bite. Once you've read, talk with your people in your group.
I said people like modern time personally you get numbers
Yeah, or it's like all the way until it's like a lot, but there's a lot that you can say about like how to make change. Yeah. And then also if you wanted to use like some numbers or anything, from it going from 31% of kinder weight. Yeah, 31% to 65%. And then going from 5.5 to 7 hour bike, that's like 28 hours a week, 35 hours a week. So you could use that as like just like from the aspect of change and not so much on what's happening.
Yeah. All right, source B. Everybody turn to source B, number your body paragraphs real quick so we can go in and figure out what's what. Source B, what did y'all say y'all liked? What was a good sound bite? What body paragraph? Anyone? Okay, what's in paragraph 5 that you like?
Second sentence.
As teachers spend more time and attention on academic content, time centered on play, exploration, and social interactions may drop. Okay? So that's going to be like the consequence of academics. Okay? Did anybody else that was reading in the other sources have anything that might support that the idea of like play is decreasing or like the effects of play decreasing? Anybody find that in their sources?
Like how it's like decreasing, plays decreasing.
Yeah. What source are you in?
Source E.
Okay.
In the last paragraph. It says play has been phased out of so many kindergarten classes.
Mm-hmm.
Like first little bit.
Yeah.
Just like that whole.
Yeah. But since we're not getting the academic results we expected, educators are now realizing that they can teach academic standards within the context of play. I like that part.
Yeah.
So I think this right here pairs with source B. So now we're making connections, right? So that even though, like we said in source B, that time centered on play and exploration is decreasing, source E supports that idea, right? And that's even from the company, right? Where is this person from? Where's Middendorf from? So look, Middendorf, who is an author of differentiating instruction in kindergarten, right, suggests that even though we can focus on academics, we can also focus on play and focus on academics, learning academics through play. So that would be like a new change. That would be like a solution to the problem. Does that make sense? So when I'm seeing that, I'm making those connections. Good. All right, source, anything else in source B that y'all liked? A lot of people here are probably going to do stuff with these numbers, right? It shows that in 1998, 31% of kindergarten teachers indicated that most children should learn to read while in kindergarten. By 2006, 65% of teachers agreed with this statement. Okay, so notice that it's increased, right? To accommodate this new reality, classroom time spent on literacy rose by 25%. So now what you're looking at is instead of spitting out the numbers, I would look at the increase over those years, right? So what's happening in 1998 where kindergarten teachers are saying, less than half are saying we need to learn how to read, right? What you're seeing in 2006 is you're seeing more people are putting their kids in like a preschool. Like what's causing this? So an extension on that fact would be what's causing that increase. Right? Well, now you're getting into more family members working, right? 2006, right? You're talking about more family, instead of being like stay-at-home moms in the 90s, right? Now you're having mom and dad working. Where are the kids having to go? Daycare or preschool. So you have more kids in daycare and preschool. So those are extensions you can make on that fact. Does that make sense? That's not a large jump. That's an inference you can make on why it's happening. Does that make sense? All right, source C. What'd y'all find in source C that y'all liked?
So we actually had one soundbite that connected with E.
Okay.
And it's in the third paragraph, and it says, preschoolers are even learning how to write their alphabet and how to read, therefore making it unnecessary for kindergarten to remain play-focused and only be academically focused.
Good.
That was our first soundbite.
Yeah, and that could contrast source E. That is unnecessary for kindergarten to remain play-focused and forced to be academically focused, right? You could kind of contrast that. Like, even though that's happening, source E says we could have a good balance, right? So what you're hearing is you're hearing your sources say it should be all academics or it should be all play. And now what we're kind of deciding is what should kindergarten be? Kindergarten should be a balance of both, right? Okay, what else did you find?
Our second one is also in the third paragraph, and it is I think it's the second to last sentence. School is the way to success in our economy. Therefore, by starting academics earlier, children are getting ahead.
Good. Let's put the pressure of our economy on kindergartners, right? Like that's exactly where our state of the country should be, is focused on kindergartners, right? So that's the other thing that I would say, is that I would say that even though you have this statement, one of the things that we like to hear is we like to hear your own voice, and I think that's where it comes, right? You'll have to start thinking, now we're worried about our economy, and we're worried about our economy, so we're going to focus on kindergartners. Like, wait, like, that's not where we should be, right? So those are extensions you can make. But I do like that. So what did you say that could tie in with source B as well? I mean, and I think it could, I mean, if we wanted to use source A, it could contrast source A for the original purpose, right? It could go, this could show like a straying away from the original purpose.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That one can also go with E. In the first paragraph, it says, in order for the United States to get ahead in the global economy, we need to upgrade our public schools.
Ooh, okay. Yep. So notice like what I'm doing is I'm reading, and y'all didn't get to read all of them, but you could see kind of how, and we did this, right? Like last week when we were like, oh, talk organically about your source. Here's what you can do. So I would just add to the side do plus C as I'm reading, right? And I would go back and I would say, just so that I have it marked as I'm going through. Because what am I doing when I'm making those connections between sources? What am I doing in my grade? You're bumping it up because you're making that connection. You can't just say they have the same thing. You can say, like, they're both suggesting this idea of our economy relying on our education, but as a nation, should we really be focusing on kindergartners, right? Shouldn't our focus be on kindergartners learning how to be creative and solve problems rather than be able to answer standardized testing, right? So that's where you want to go. Good. All right, source D. Source D, did you think it was easy or hard? Graphs, charts, they're a little sketchy sometimes. What'd y'all think?
We just said modern education is more effective than that in like in the 90s.
Okay, because you're looking at the difference between 1993, 1999, and 1997. So what did you see? You saw that this supports the idea that that the focus is on education, right? Ages 3 to 6. So you don't start school, kindergarten is age 5. So this shows that more kids are learning outside of elementary, right? 3 and 4, either they're learning at home, they're learning at their preschool, or they're learning at their daycare. Now I look at that and I go, but can everybody afford that? Can everybody afford $1,300, $1,400 a month for preschool? Right? I mean, that's a lot of money, right? So that's one of the holes that I'm looking at there. Anything that anybody's saying? Go ahead, Macy.
So, like the last part that says reads or pretends to read.
Yeah.
Pretends. It's like that's higher than any of them.
Yeah.
The lowest is recognizing all the letters. So, like, are they really digesting?
That's really good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how about it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's really great. I think that's something that you can suggest the hole in the research. So how do we get from the same group of kids, low numbers that can recognize letters, however, more than 2/3 of them are supposedly reading or pretending to read? Is that accurate? Is that showing that kids are actually learning, or are they just kind of faking it for the test? I think that's a great hole to point out. Yeah. And we love when you do that. We love when you go, not when you question the validity of it, but when you go, oh, God, there's something not right in that data. Yeah, absolutely. Right? I think that's a great one. All right. Anything else in source E that y'all liked? I think y'all found that we've paired them together pretty well.
Yeah, in the third paragraph, it says children's questions are a form of mastery play. So how it's like,
Yeah, children are creating their own learning experiences. Yeah, I love that soundbite. I think that's great.
And also in paragraph 2 it says imaginative play is a catalyst for social, physical, emotional, and moral development in young children.
Yeah. So notice that it's like what we're learning from this is that play is underrated as not as a learning environment. However, this research is showing the exact opposite, right? That it's almost more effective for a young child to do that because they can do the letters, the numbers, the all that. But they can also learn social standards and imaginative and all the things, right? It's more complex learning that way than it is just book learning. All right, so now that y'all have read through, now you plan and trying to find my prompt. Okay. So now, let's answer. What should kindergarten be now? What would be our answer? Our kindergarten should be what?
A balance between learning and play. Like learning out of books.
Yeah. Okay, there's your answer. That's your thesis. Kindergarten should be a balance between learning and play. Okay. How do you see your body paragraphs? What are going to be your topics? Remember the questions are how or why. So I would say one would be about a focus on learning, and one would be a focus on play. Now I think what's probably scary for y'all is I've been like, don't do half and half, right? However, this prompt leads you into, and your thesis says, it should be a balance between learning and play. So then you would go say, okay, where can we see the focus should be, like the value that we have in focusing on academics? What sources can we say would support that? That there is a value on focusing on academics. What sources would support that? Or maybe one that would support it and one that would maybe counter it that would lead into our play one. Didn't y'all say that kindergarten helps with?
C&D.
Yeah, with our, is that the economy one? Yeah. So I would say something along the lines of, early education has proven to help the economy. Now you're going to have to say more than that it helps the economy. You're going to have to go into this and talk about how it helps the economy, right? And the second one would be why focus on play? What would be your two sources that you could use in play? I feel like we want to use E a whole lot. Be very careful of using E a whole lot. I think here you could use A because you could go back to the original reason, right, for schooling, right? And then what would be another good one that we could use from your sound bites?
B really balances it, I feel like. So I don't know who should put, like specifically in paragraph 4, it says young children are curious, enthusiastic learners, and then it goes on to say there are ways to teach early literacy and math content that's fun and engaging. So it literally says the same, and but I don't know where you want.
I mean, I think you can do this like the origins, and then say that this is the new Like B suggests like the new focus should be the balance, right? So there's your paper. And yes, we just spent 30 minutes on that. But it's fine. Think about like you're going to be doing that much faster, right? And at least if you get through at least half of your sources, notice that one of our better sources was at the end. So that's why I like going through and looking at the persona and looking at the italicized part before I commit to the first 3 sources. So when I'm looking through the sources, I'm looking like, are there bolded parts? Is there one that's bolded? I'm going to look at that one, right? Because that might give me some ideas. I'm going to skim through and look at like the title and the italicized part. And sometimes like there's the good stuff is at the end, right? That's fine. So kind of go through and look, but you want to, when you're reading, try to make those organic connections to those other sources, because that's going to help you expand on it. And then remember your personas as well. So it's just like the audience in a rhetorical analysis. Go back and look at the audience and who is concerned about this issue. That's going to give you the ability to extend on your piece of evidence. Does that make sense? All right, questions for synthesis. Good. Manage your time. Start time, end time.
Do we quote the source?
Yes.
Or paraphrase it?
Yes.
Quote it?
Both. I felt like when I was reading the mock exams that too many people paraphrased, and unless I can go and give you a specific, unless I can point to where you're paraphrasing, it's not a good paraphrase. So, I mean, for the most part, I would say I would like you to direct quote. I think when we paraphrase or summarize, we end up overgeneralizing something. But like some of those were so well said that I liked the way they said it. But try to find different ways to embed your text. Remember, we want to stay away from in source E it states, right? We want to talk about the people that are, mentioned in the source. What's the one that we... Like these, you could talk about the studies, right, that was done. Here you can, in source E, you can talk about not Kerwood, but you can talk about Middendorf, the author of Differentiating Instruction in Kindergarten, right? You can introduce it that way. Just remember that even though there are different people like Glowenkoff, these names, Glowenkoff, Middendorf, sounds like they should be on like Harry Potter. Elkind, don't forget that all these different people do not count as a citation. Even if you use Middendorf and you write her name, you still have to cite source E. Okay? So you still have to go in and cite that letter after you use that source. I mean, yeah, I would say I would be more comfortable with y'all doing direct text and then just finding different ways to embed it. Right? You ready to move on to rhetorical analysis? Okay. Take out rhetorical analysis. I got about 15 minutes. Listen, if y'all need to go, you go. You're fine. Okay? You're not going to hurt my feelings. All right. So, a couple of things you notice. This is old. This is like 13 years old. Notice it's question 1. What's question 1 now? Synthesis. So, this is like a pre-synthesis question. Okay? But I still think the way stuff is asked is the same. All right. When we get a prompt, what do? Bat the prompt, okay? The passage below is an excerpt from Jennifer Price's recent essay, The Plastic Pink Flamingo, A Natural History. The essay examines the popularity of the plastic pink flamingo in the 1950s. Read the passage carefully. Then write an essay in which you analyze how Price crafts the text to reveal her view of United States culture. So this is going to be... Instead of analyze how Price crafts, it's going to be analyze her choices. I mean, that's what we would see now. Now, this is one of those prompts. Can you get much from the background? What background are we getting? Here's your author. Do what? Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, it was written more recently, so this is recent, so we know it's a recent article. Actually, if we look down here, it's from 1999, right? So it's recent. Okay, so it's from 1999. Y'all weren't even born yet, were you? Oh, I was out of my first year of college. With my master's degree. Okay. So what's happening in 1999 that we're looking back at the 1950s? What's happening in history in the 1950s? Y'all literally just took an APUSH exam on Friday. And U.S. history on Wednesday.
Yeah, but the questions on that were like, what is...
What's happening in the 50s?
Cold War.
The what?
The Cold War.
Okay.
Like kind of the beginning of civil rights, a little bit.
Okay. So we're looking at like this like kind of cultural change, right? That's about all I could get from this. And I'm digging at this point. It's nothing like we saw like for like Abigail Adams, or if we would have a JFK, or we would have some kind of historical speech or letter. We're not looking at a wide range of historical context here, right? Okay. Now, where's your task? Where does your task start? So my question would be, what is her view on U.S. culture? I'm taking my task and I'm making it into a question. The other thing that we forgot is like our audience. I mean, I don't really, like, what would you say is your audience? Because remember, audience gives us like the ability to kind of extend on or talk about a piece of evidence. What would you say about your audience? Who would be your audience for this? 1999, we're looking back on like cultural movements. What are we looking at? Okay, we're going to skip it. We'll come back after we read it. Then we can come back and see what she says, okay? All right, we have our task. Now what do we do before we read? Number your buddy paragraphs. Four paragraphs. Now what? Okay. Where would you guess a shift? Between 2 and 3. We're going to guess it there. All right. Remember, we're looking for what is her view on culture. You ready? When the pink flamingo splashed into the 50s market, it staked two major claims to boldness. First, it was a flamingo. Since the 1930s, vacationing Americans had been flocking, isn't she funny, flocking in flamingos, to Florida and returning home with flamingo souvenirs. I'm writing like, it was bold, right? The idea of it, this idea of coming home with a souvenir is very nostalgic. Like, why do you come home with a souvenir? Like, why do you want a souvenir? So when you look back, you remember, right? And returning home with flamingo souvenirs. In the 1910s and 20s, Miami Beach's first Grand Hotel, the Flamingo, had made the bird synonymous with wealth and pizzazz. So we're looking at this being a symbol. Later, developers built hundreds of more modest hotels to cater to an eager middle class served by the new train lines. And in South Beach, especially, architects employed the playful Art Deco style, replete with bright pinks and flamingo motifs. All right, so what is the flamingo representing here in this first body paragraph? Wealth, yeah. Wealth and like status, right? Like this idea, like you can go to a hotel, you can travel, right? It's very flashy. So it's not just wealth, you want everybody to know that you're wealthy, right? This is a little ironic since Americans had hunted flamingos to extinction in Florida in the late 1800s for plumes and meat, but no matter. In the 1950s, the new interstates would draw working class tourists down too. Back in New Jersey, the Union Products Flamingo inscribed one's lawn emphatically with Florida's cachet of leisure and extravagance. So notice that we're making it all the way up north. And now we're getting into the middle class. The bird acquired an extra fillip of boldness, too, from the direction of Las Vegas, the flamboyant oasis of instant riches that the gangster Benjamin Bugsy Siegel had conjured from the desert in 1946 with his Flamingo Hotel. Anyone who has seen Las Vegas knows that a flamingo stands out in a desert even more strikingly than on a lawn. In the 1950s, namesake Flamingo motels, restaurants, and lounges cropped up across the country like a line of semiotic sprouts. All right, now what does the symbol, what does the flamingo stand for? What is it talking about culture now? Now we're looking at the gangsters. We're looking at Las Vegas. Still looking at money? Okay. We're looking at extravagance. And the flamingo was pink. So here we're looking at like just the shape or the thing, right? Here we're looking at the color. So now I would say like our guess is kind of right because before we're talking about the actual bird, right? The flamingo, and now we're talking about the color. All right? The flamingo was pink, a second and commiserate claim to boldness. The plastics industry of the 50s favored flashy colors, which Tom Wolfe called the new electrochemical pastels of the Florida littoral. Tangerine, broiling magenta, livid pink, incarnadine, fuchsia demure, Congo ruby, methyl green. The hues were forward-looking rather than old-fashioned. Just right for a generation raised in the Depression that was ready to celebrate its new affluence. And as Carol Ann Marling has written, the sassy pinks were the hottest color of the decade. Washing machines, cars, kitchen counters proliferated in passion pink, sunset pink, and Bermuda pink. So it's on like everything. Cars, houses, etc. In 1956, right after he signed his first recording contract, Elvis Presley bought a pink Cadillac. Why, after all, call the birds pink flamingos, as if they could be blue or green. The plastic flamingo is a hotter pink than a real flamingo. And even a real flamingo is brighter than anything else around it. There are 5 species, all of which feed in flocks on algae and invertebrates and saline and alkaline lakes in mostly warm habitats around the world. The people who have lived near these places have always singled out the flamingo as special. Early Christians associated with the red phoenix. In ancient Egypt, it symbolized the sun god Ra. In Mexico and the Caribbean, it remains a major motif in art, dance, and literature. So it's something spiritual, right? No wonder that the subtropical species stood out so loudly when Americans in temperate New England reproduced it, brightened it, and sent it wading across an inland sea of grass. All right, what's difficult about this text?
What is she trying to say?
It's totally random. It's totally random. There's no real, like what we would say, like, look at the parallelism. Look at, right? So what we have to look at is we have to look at what is she saying about culture. Okay, so the first part is looking at the body itself, the bird itself, right? What did the bird itself represent?
Wealth and stuff.
Okay. So this is like the bird. And did you see why I saw that? Like I saw this idea, and the flamingo was pink, right? So it was a flamingo. First it was a flamingo, and it was pink. So those two things. And then what do we say the second part represents? What does the color represent?
Characteristic.
Of what?
The flamingo.
No.
Change. Like trendy. Like
Change. Change. New, trendy. Okay, I like that. Y'all with me? Now listen, here's what happens. If you get into a rhetorical analysis and you're like, bah, like I just did right now, because I hate when that happens. If you get into a rhetorical analysis and you're like, holy crap, I have no idea what that says. Like, I don't get it. Stop and go back to your tools, right? Okay, we look at and we say, okay, where can I divide this up? I divided it up. I go back and say, what is she saying about culture? The whole thing is centered around a pink flamingo, right? So if this is the pink flamingo, what is she saying about American culture? That we value wealth and like our social status. What is she saying? How does that pink flamingo represent our culture? Because we want to always stay on trend. We always want the new thing, the next new thing, right? Okay, so then those two things, what is your big idea? We are a culture that values wealth, status, and being trendy. We are a culture, what is that saying about our culture? That we are what?
It's like we're self-absorbed.
Yeah. Self-absorbed. We are superficial. We are concerned about how others view us. That is your big idea. Does that make sense? So then now you go back in and you look at the pieces of evidence that we underlined or that we noted, and you say, okay, how does that represent wealth and status? Now, let's go back. Now that we maybe understand this a little bit better, now let's look at who's her audience. Who can be her audience now? Okay, so it can be an older generation.
The wealthy, maybe.
Could be the wealthy.
Middle class.
And is she trying to show that that's good or bad?
Bad.
Bad. Yeah, she's trying to look on the negative. So she's looking at those that care about money and status. Yeah. So the reason why I pulled this one is I don't like it, first of all. But the reason why I pulled it is because I think if you get something that is like Abigail Adams now, or is like a Frederick Douglass or JFK or something that is heavily riddled with rhetoric, y'all are fine. What happens when we get a piece where we're like, ugh, there's no evidence. Remember, ultimately what we're looking for in rhetorical analysis is not, it is language, but we're looking at her organization of argument, right? No matter what they give you, they are looking at how did this person craft this argument? How did they make you see that, right? Otherwise, it's just an article about pink flamingos and like their history within the United States. What's her bigger argument? Why are we reading this? That's what you have to look for. Every time you read anything, why did this person write this? They don't want me, I don't really care about the history of the pink flamingo. So what is her bigger purpose? She's ultimately trying to show us that we're a superficial society. Have been, still are. Does that make sense? Okay. Questions? Yeah.
Do you think that it's good to like actually like say what your strategy is, like not like saying like they use like I don't know like
Diction. Yeah.
Yeah, or do you think that it's like not saying it like that, but like do you think it's better to say it like in a way where you're like
she uses parallelism or...
Yeah, or do you think it's better to just not say that?
I mean, it depends. If you know what you're talking about, then it's fine. As long as you know what you're talking about and you can move beyond just pointing it out and can move to the point of here is parallelism and this is its purpose.
Yeah, like how it adds to it.
Yeah. Yeah, but we don't necessarily, but if you do it wrong and you do it wrong multiple times, then it is going to score you down.
So it's sometimes better, like, if you're not completely, like, sure, like, to not say what it is, like, just give a quote and talk about how it adds to the purpose.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Ultimately, we don't care if you're labeling things.
Okay.
We don't care. It doesn't get you any points. As long as you can pull me a piece of evidence and tell me why it's important, then I'm going to give you points. Can you all stop stressing out for me?